Alrighty, so let's go to our final micro-intervention case for our session today, and we'll talk about Mr. Edwards. And the reason why we presented this micro-intervention is because it reflects something that is also fairly common in school spaces, things that we see. We know that educators hold an incredible amount of power, even though it may not always feel like it, but they have an incredible amount of power to either uplift or diminish a student's sense of worth, and they also have an incredible amount of power to provide access as it relates to academics that can have lasting impact well into their adulthood. So now what we're going to do is analyze a case study or scenario where a limiting mindset from an adult arises, so that way if this happens in your practice, you can recognize it, find the hidden message, think about the impact, and then prepare to neutralize, prepare to attack. All right, so I'll give you a minute to read. All right, so again, we're looking for the microaggression, but then our next move is to identify the hidden message. So what hidden message does this statement promote about which students are capable of excelling in math? But even more broad, in a broader sense, let's think about what's the lasting impact for certain communities of students within the school. Take a minute to jot it down in your journal. Okay, so as educators, we know that our words can shape whether students feel empowered or limited in their potential. But we also understand that our thinking, which leads to our actions, can actually shape policies that impact the realities of our students. And that traditionally, students who come from minoritized communities or historically or actively marginalized communities are often negatively impacted by the hidden biases, and then the policies that are shaped as a result of the hidden biases from adults. And so part of our work as allies and as bystanders is to, again, recognize those microaggressions when they happen. We identify the hidden messages. We think about what's the potential harm, and we reach out for the best strategy to intervene. So when we think about Mr. Edwards, we want to figure out what's an appropriate micro-intervention that not only addresses this thinking and the harm and gets them to unpack the impact on students, but we do it in a way where he doesn't shut down, he doesn't feel attacked, and he doesn't feel alienated. So some ways that we can intervene for impact here is we can explicitly differentiate intent from impact. So we're going to name that we don't think that that was your intention, but regardless, there was a negative impact. There was harm there. So let's consider how we nurture all of the kids' potential. So we can also contradict stereotypes through personalization, because many times these hidden biases come from these groupings together and making like broad blanket statements about communities, certain communities and their actions. So then we can personalize it. So bring it back to self. Let's go back to I statements. As an educator struggling with math, I benefited from teachers who saw my potential and didn't define me. So, when we have educators who are doing right by kids, kids can do amazing things. So you can actually contradict those stereotypes through personalization. Promote empathy, both for the perpetrator and for the person who is experiencing the microaggression. So, Mr. Edwards, studies show that kids internalize these messages about what subjects or opportunities they deserve. And when we restrict access, we harm, name the harm to students' confidence and their relationships with schools. School is supposed to be a safe place. And by doing these things, it is not safe for certain communities of our kids. We name those harms. And then the last thing that we can do, the last tactic that we have, is to reframe the meaning of the statement of the action that was presented by the perpetrator. So, Mr. Edwards, you seem to associate high achieving exclusively with test scores, but let's reframe that. Let's reframe achievement. Let's get a broader definition, and let's look at how and use research, studies, and facts to look at different ways that students can show success and what happens when we put appropriate support structures in place that allow all kids to thrive. So let's go beyond, our limited beliefs around what we think some kids can and some kids can't do.